to be as books survey the city and survey the ethnic groups. We're here too. It's not just, we're part of the diversity. It's not just the minority, so-called minority groups. We are part of this diversity. And in Chicago, there are probably 60 different ethnic groups of one kind or another. And a while back, I participated in a book called Ethnic Chicago, that you might have heard of. And it went on in several volumes to try to get to the 60, 80 or whatever numbers, but I think it fell short of 30. But when people think of ethnic groups today, too often the journalists especially think only in terms of minority and racial groups. But we Italians are in there too. We were there too. Our next author is a specialist in murder. Murder at Point Breeze, murder on Capri, and is there another one? Murder in the Vatican? There's murder everywhere. Arthur Cola is a retired teacher, educator who has since retirement found a second calling, and he has written fiction, that is murder fiction, for the last dozen years or so, and he's got probably a dozen books. I'm glad to have back at our IA Literati, Arthur Cola. The PowerPoint.
That's all right, I can do it.
Don't credo.
Okay. Well, you're not gonna get the slideshow. The PowerPoint's not connected, so you're just gonna have to endure me without the artifacts. Well, I grew up here on the near west side. Our family address was 819 West Taylor. So we moved west to Oak Park. So I went to Oak Park High School. I'm a graduate of Loyola University, where our young man is going and our professor is from. And my family is, I'm 100% Italian. I'm married to an Irish woman. We have 5 kids that are mutts because she's Irish and they're Italian, and there's a little German in there. So we're kind of an ethnic mix. But when I started to write, I wanted to kind of stay away from pure history because I kind of thought that was a little dry for the average reader. And so my work is all fictional. I used to dwell on historical fiction, and I went into a little fantasy. I went into a thriller, and I was at a festival, a book festival, and an author friend of mine, Mary Carter, who lives in Chicago on the east side. And she said, Arthur, you need to get into this murder thing. This is the thing today. It's selling like hotcakes. And I said, well, I'm not making any money writing history books, so let me see what I could do. So I started writing a series called the Cenza Murder Mysteries. The Cenza is the maiden name of my paternal grandmother. And so Cenza. And we grew up with Grandma Libby. That was who the Cenza was. And we moved to Oak Park. I was a kid. We were one of the first Italian families to move into Oak Park, except for the mafia people. And the Occardos and the Giancanas and all those people lived down the street. So I wanted to stay away from that stereotypical stuff in my books too. I must admit that in Murder at the World's Fair, I did make him a mafia type person, and I apologize for that because I don't want people to always think of mafia when they read about Italian people. So, but it just fit into the story and made it a little more dramatic. And it was set in New York, and that kind of lends to it too. So anyway, I began this series with Murder at the Abbey. This is about the only son of an Italian-American family who announces that he wants to enter the priesthood. This is set in the 1960s now, so you have to go back a few years. And the trauma that causes to an Italian family with only one son. Italian families in the 60s with one son. They have to carry on the name, right? So they were having a heart attack. The kid wants to go to the seminary. He goes to the seminary to study for the priesthood. It's an abbey in the rural section of Wisconsin. And he ends up involved in murder, blackmail, and forbidden sex. So it's a little spicy. Yeah. Mary also told me you gotta have spice in it or they don't sell. So it's a little spicy. My wife says I can't do romance, so I do a little spice. So each of those adventures are separate, but the characters remain the same. So the main character in the book is Ron DeCenza. He has a buddy, and they go off to the seminary, and they meet other people, and then their little group of sleuths kind of expands as you go from story to story. But except for the relational part of the story, which is a continuation through each book, each story stands alone, so you're not going to be lost. If you start with Vatican, Murder in the Vatican, like Carla's going to do, it's okay. The Murder in the World's Fair is the next one, and that takes you to New York City during the New York World's Fair. Now, the big highlight of the New York World's Fair was what? The Vatican Pavilion, the first time that a Renaissance work of art was being brought to America. And John the 23rd, now St. John the 23rd, gave permission for Michelangelo's Pietà to be taken out of St. Peter's and brought to New York to the Vatican Pavilion. Now, this was a big deal. They created this statue up. They had it on the deck of the Cristoforo Colombo, on the deck, not below deck, in case the ship sank, the box holding the statue would float. It was unbelievable. The captain said that the happiest day of his life was when they finally got it off the boat. So the story all revolves around the Pietà, it coming to America, and what people were going to try to do to disrupt the Pietà coming to America. So then we go into Murder in the Vatican, and the character Ron DeCenza and his pal are in the Vatican now. They're studying the Apostolic College. They're doing, they're kind of like plebs run, what do they call those people who do that in the United States Senate? They run all the messages around pages. They were like pages for the Vatican consul. And they witness an act of violence in the Tiber River. And they find themselves confronting a group of terrorists, which we would call terrorists. Back then they were called revolutionaries. They were called the Red Brigade. And if you know your history a little bit, the Red Brigade is something that terrorized Italy during the 1960s. They were trying to overthrow the government, trying to make it a communist state, and so forth and so on. So they become involved in combating these kinds of people, while they also discover a mystery relating to the Italian Renaissance and also to the 1946 election, which overthrew the House of Savoy as the monarchy of the Kingdom of Italy when it turned into a republic. And if you know the story of that election, the king lost his throne by 500,000 votes, give or take. So it's a pretty close election. And my theory is what makes the story go. My theory, and it doesn't mean that the election is historically accurate. The royal family is accurate. King Umberto is real, but the election is my interpretation of how that happened. And so from that, the characters in the book are taken to Mellifont, which is an abbey ruin in Ireland. And so it takes on an Irish, little Irish flavor. And of course, that's done, for my wife, because she's Irish. And I always put something a little Irish for her when I write my books. I've got 10 other books I've written. So there's a slew of but I wanted to talk to you about Murder on Capri because it's kind of a fun story in the relational, because Rhonda Cenza is finding out that throughout these books that maybe he shouldn't be a priest, maybe his vocation wasn't to the priesthood. And it kind of evolves as he meets this girl in the gift shop. And this girl is constantly coming into his life, whether it's in the Vatican Pavilion or it's in the Abbey, or now it's in Capri, and how that develops. So that's kind of the relational story going on. But the reason I chose Capri is that I took my students there on a tour as part of our tour of Italy. And we found it to be, a really exciting place to be. And one of the impressive parts of Capri, of course, is the famous Blue Grotto. You all know about the grotto, ever been there? And you know how you have to take the boat and then you have to climb down this rope ladder into a rowboat, which looks like it's going to sink because all it is this one rower there. And it's not like a Venetian rower singing O Sole Mio, it's just this old guy, with a stick taking you through this archway. And the archway is so low, everybody has to duck like this because you're going to crack your head on the granite and on the limestone, right? But when you get in there, it's like, whoa, it's so mystical and it's beautiful and it's all this blue hues, and you begin to realize, oh my God, no wonder Emperor Tiberius wanted to use this as his private swimming hole and all of that. Of course, I'm teaching all this to my kids while we're going through the grotto about the emperor and so forth. And so I had to, years later now, I'm writing this book and I got to make that part of the story. Another time we went to Capri, it was my wife and I, so she said, we're not romantic. I said, I'm going to take you to Capri. So I'm going to show her the Blue Grotto, go in the Blue Grotto. And the guy is actually singing O Sole Mio. Can you stand it? So I just mock him for not doing it. And so it was really kind of cool. And then we find out there's more than just the Blue Grotto on Capri. There's the Green Grotto, there's the White Grotto, there's the Red Grotto. There's all these beautiful places in this little 4 square mile island. And so that becomes part of the romantic part of the story, as best as I can do. So the story is about this Rhonda Cenza, his girlfriend Sue, and this group of friends that they have, and how they're going to come to Capri to have a little R&R after some rather harrowing adventures in the Vatican and in Mellifont, and where they find out that they discover a dead body in the Blue Grotto. And the body is not just an ordinary, what we might call a homeless person today or something like that. It was a professor of history of Italian pre-Republic history. And they discovered that he has the biography of one of the kings of Naples, who later becomes the king of Spain. And that person is Joseph Bonaparte. Well, I'm writing this book and I happen to be introduced to a man called Mr. Peter Tucci. He is a cavalier, he's a knight of the Legion of Honor of the nation of France. And he has the largest private collection of artifacts dealing with the Bonaparte family here in America. So he invites me over. We start talking about the legend of Joseph Bonaparte. And I said, well, I'm just working on this book. And I invented a book in the story about Joseph Bonaparte and how he left all these secret clues and everything about this mystery. And he said, well, it's not a mystery. He actually wrote his own autobiography, and it's a set of them, and he had the actual set, Joseph Bonaparte's books. And I said, I'm not going to use all 8 of them. I'm going to narrow it down to 1 because the characters are not going to be able to deal with 8 books. That's too complicated. So we'll make it one book biography. But the truth in the biography is that when Joseph Bonaparte had to flee the King of Spain after Napoleon, his brother, was defeated, was that he took with him the crown jewels of Spain, which to this day have never been found. And he fled to Switzerland, and where he buried part of the treasure. That's historically accurate. And then he brought the other part of the treasure to America, where he lived here for 17 years with his mistress, who bore him children, while his wife and his daughter fled to Belgium after defeated Napoleon. So that, to me, that as a history teacher and, you know, as a writer and so forth, this is a very cool legend. We're going to have to weave this into the story. So this whole story is about how these young people discover the biography of Joseph Bonaparte, and they go on the trail of trying to find the lost treasure, the lost crown jewels of Spain. And it culminates in this book, becomes a two-part mystery in Murder at Point Breeze, where they all come back to America in a series of events. They begin to unravel what Joseph did with this treasure. If you go to upstate New York at a place called Lake Bonaparte, it used to be Lake Diana. That's how it was named by Joseph Bonaparte. But when he settled there in his summer home, the people renamed it Lake Bonaparte. To this day, you will still have tourists going into the caverns searching for the crown jewels of Spain left by Joseph Bonaparte. So it's a pretty cool legend, and it's still active today in our century. So I hope you will take a look at them. It's a little fun. There's a little, all the historical aspects of all the books are accurate, and the characters, I think you'll have a little fun with them as well as they develop in their relationships. And I'll take that.
Our next presenter is Peter Perro.